Hi, Oregon. Welcome to the Big Ten. It looks like you woke up just in time to take it on head first. Before we dive deep into Oregon versus Oregon State and talk about the Ducks' dominant performance, I want you to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, share this video around, and also click the notification bell. Again, like, hit the subscribe button, hit the share button, hit the notification bell, and reply to this video, to the game, give your reaction and analysis down in the comment section below. Those things do not take much time. They help give me a sense of how the fan base feels, whether Oregon or Oregon State, about this game, about the future, as every precious college football game does give an implication about a team's future. And it also helps us earn more subscribers and more money and continues to grow our community. We're trying to hit 20,000 subscribers within the next month, and we'll be doing a giveaway for that. And College Football with Sam prides itself on being the best Big Ten football community and is striving to be the best college football community. And your subscription and hitting the notification bell so that you can get notified when we release new content, along with liking the video, is a huge part of that. Also, check out the Discord server and please join it. You can find the link to that via the pinned comment. And if you want to support the channel monetarily, the link to my merchandise store, so you can represent Oregon and College Football with Sam with an Oregon-themed t-shirt. Or if you're a fan of any of the other Big Ten programs, your school's theme is in a College Football with Sam t-shirt. Or if you want my weekly picks, sign up as a Patreon member. The link to my Patreon page and merchandise store are in the description and the pinned comment. But let's get to this game. And the Ducks just pounding their rivals just like they did last year, except this time it was in Reser Stadium, not in Autzen Stadium. Oregon won 49-14, but they didn't score 7 touchdowns. They scored 6 touchdowns and kicked 2 field goals. And the reason the score ended up being 49-14 Oregon was because Kenyon Sadiq ran it in for a 2-point conversion after Oregon's second touchdown with 13 minutes and 36 seconds left in the second quarter. Oregon State, after allowing Oregon to score another touchdown on an 8-play, 84-yard drive with 6 minutes and 43 seconds left in the second quarter, which made it 22-7, Oregon went on their own 14-play, 81-yard, 6-minute, and 22-second drive, finished off with an Anthony Hankerson 1-yard run to make it 22-14, entering halftime. But exiting the half, Oregon scored 27 unanswered points, and Oregon State just couldn't come back. What Oregon State needed to do was control the clock, which they did, but to a very limited degree, and they needed to limit big plays and pressure Dillon Gabriel and throw the offense off and make Oregon one-dimensional and slow down the run. Well, Oregon's offensive line came to play. They didn't allow a single sack. Oregon on the ground averaged 7.5 yards per carry. The offensive line for Oregon as well only allowed 2 tackles for loss. It was a very impressive performance from start to finish. You know, I'm not asking Oregon to march into their rivals' stadium, and Oregon State over the previous 2 seasons, 2022 and 2023, has been a top 20, top 15 team. They're not going to fall off completely in 1 year. They're obviously not what they were under Jonathan Smith, but there are some pieces along the offensive line and defense and a good set of running backs, and heck, I'd even say quarterbacks. I think Giovanni McCoy is a very good quarterback for the Group of 5 level, and his QBR would say that. He right now is 13th in QBR, and that's even factoring in the loss against Oregon, where he ran the football well, did really what he needed to do and what he could do given the weapons that he had in the passing offense. But getting back to Oregon, I'm not going to ask them to lead how Tennessee led Kent State, because Oregon State would probably beat Kent State by 30 or 40 points, and it's a rival on the road against a team that entering this game profiled to match up well with Oregon. I did not pick Oregon State to upset Oregon. Thought Oregon had too much talent everywhere. But at the end of the day, Oregon came to play, and their result was one of the more surprising results in my mind of the week. Nothing could top Notre Dame hanging a 60 burger on Purdue and destroying them. I got that take totally wrong. But as for Oregon, they dominated this game. They controlled it. They were able to run the ball. They were able to slow down the run. I think there are some things that may be desired of that defense that Dan Lanning wants to see, that I don't know if that roster is capable of producing yet, or at least hasn't produced yet. But Oregon is a team that they improved from Idaho to Boise. Not too much, but you saw a spark with the special teams that we haven't seen under Dan Lanning, and with Boise State's a much better opponent than Idaho, and Oregon beat them. So I'd classify that as slight improvement. Oregon really did play like garbage the first 2 weeks. In this game, this is the Oregon that I expected to see entering this season. Now it's one good game out of 3 games in total, so I want to see more consistency. But Oregon played phenomenally well. The Ducks dominated the Beavers, 240 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns, 306 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns. Dante Moore even got involved, had 3 passing attempts and also 3 completions on the day. Oregon was precise, they were accurate, they were powerful. They looked like one of college football's best teams if you only look at week 3. But we have more than a 1-game sample size right now. If week 3 was week 1 of the college football season and Oregon kicked off with Oregon State, the feelings and the analysis surrounding this team would be different. But they're not, because Idaho and Boise State happened and showcased that there are depth concerns along the offensive line, showed that Dillon Gabriel, now he looks very comfortable in Will Stein's offense, but in the first 2 weeks he didn't. And he doesn't have the same upside that Bo Nix did, doesn't have the same arm strength. And while he's fast on the ground, I don't think he has Bo Nix's athleticism either. He had that great run against Oregon State on that speed option. Last year he took a scramble for several yards against Texas, had a really good game on the ground against them. But he doesn't have that same dynamic playmaking capability that Bo Nix does. However, in watching this game, if Oregon's offensive line produces at this level, that won't be much of a problem. The areas where you have to focus on, if you're Oregon, Dan Lanning, and the staff, is the defense. Oregon allowed 131 rushing yards on 4.1 yards per carry. Now, I do think Oregon State has a good offensive line. Is it great? Is it near elite? I don't think so. Maybe. It's certainly not an elite offensive line. But through 3 games, including against an Oregon team that had 2 sacks, 3 TFLs, whose defense played, I think, its best game of the season so far, and its offense certainly did, and profiles when you factor in talent, coaching, and potential as certainly a top 10 team, and I think after week 3 you have to say that Oregon's a top 10 team, is impressive. Running for 4 yards per carry or more in their first 3 games. They certainly do have a great rushing offense, or at least the potential to, and certainly a good one and above average one. But for Oregon, you have to look at this, the fact that Boise State gutted you. Idaho had, for being an FCS team, an okay performance on the ground, and Oregon State was able to consistently run on the Ducks and control the clock. What will Ohio State do? Because Ohio State has 2 running backs that could be just as good as Ashton Jeanty. They have outside weapons and a much better quarterback than Matto Madsen, so they'll force Oregon's defense to play in a more balanced way, and Ohio State will better be able to keep the Ducks' defense honest. And what about Michigan? Michigan, their offensive line has not been their problem on offense. It has not been the same unit as in 2021 or 2022 or 2023, but it's not the problem. They ran for over 300 yards against Arkansas State. They only ran for 80 yards against Texas, but they got behind in that game and were rushing for 4 or 5 yards per carry in the first half. And against Fresno State in the fourth quarter, they turned it up and really showed they do have a powerful rushing game, especially with Kalel Mullings. And they have Alex Orji, who's a mobile QB, the most mobile QB that Michigan's had in the 2020s. And Donovan Edwards has that breakaway speed, and if he begins to clear up his, cutbacks and his reading of the field, his observational skills, he could break out. What I'm trying to say here is, in the Big Ten, trench play on the interior of both the offense and the defense and how you run the ball determines your success. It does. I mean, Ohio State, for example, let's look at the game. Ohio State in 2021 objectively had the higher ceiling than Michigan that year, the far higher ceiling. But Michigan was that much better at stopping the run and running the football to where, well, Michigan won by 15. In 2022, I think they had similar ceilings. Michigan was certainly catching up, but they had that matchup advantage, that better interior trench play on both sides of the football, and the better running backs. Consequently, they beat Ohio State in their own house by 22. And Ohio State played Georgia close that year, and Michigan lost to TCU. And I don't want to get into semantics or too many details. That was years ago. But the point is, you can even look at like Iowa, for example, where Iowa has not had any passing game whatsoever and has had offenses that are less dynamic than many offenses in the then Big Ten West, but they came out on top of Purdue or on top of Wisconsin or on top of these different Big Ten teams, some of whom beat them in the regular season because their awesome defense, and they had also good interior trench players on defense and offense, and good enough running backs allowed them to survive and advance and control games. And that is where I would look at Oregon, not just with their struggles on the offensive line in the first two games, and the fact that the more consistency you see out of this unit, the better. But the defense, the rushing defense, it does need work. And it's faced good rushing attacks. Like if you were to look at strength of schedule for just running the football, Oregon's strength of schedule would be pretty high up there because Oregon State has a good rushing offense. Boise State is a great, perhaps elite rushing offense. Maybe Oregon State's is great. And Ohio State and Michigan have... We'll wait and see until the end of the year, but I wouldn't be shocked if Michigan and Ohio State finish with certainly top 20 rushing offenses, perhaps top 15, top 10 when you factor in the defenses that they play. Oregon is going to be facing a boatload of teams who can run the football, who want to run the football. Wisconsin, with Ches Malusi and that offensive line, they will run the football, and they will probably run it at a similar level that Oregon State does. So I think the defense still needs work. I don't think I'm being too critical here because Oregon State really doesn't have much of an offense outside of their ground attack. I mean, I think Giovanni McCoy is a good quarterback for Oregon State, good at the G5 level, but you look at the receiver talent that Oregon State has and the fact that Giovanni McCoy was starting at, Idaho last year, they do not have even close to what they had last year with DJ Uiagalelei when he had a much better offensive coordinator and supporting cast, and also Silas Bolden compared to what they have now, and Jack Velling as well. This Oregon State team is not terrible. They haven't completely fallen off of the face of the earth, but they are a shell of their former selves. This is not last year Oregon State or 2022 Oregon State. This is an Oregon State team that borders on between the average Big 12 or ACC team and between the average Group of 5 team. They're like just in that sweet spot between the lower Power 4 and the G5. They're probably a high-level G5 team, like comparable to Boise State or Washington State or Memphis, etc. But let's talk about Oregon some more, this time the positives. Again, on this channel, we always save the best for last. We get the ugly out of the way, the bad out of the way, and we finish it off with a positive note because we save the best for last. Offense for Oregon is high-flying. It has high octane. It has the potential to be one of the best offenses in the country. If you don't believe me, look on your screen and also listen to what I'm about to say to you. Oregon averaged 9.25 yards per play, and they averaged about 0.83 points per play. They averaged nearly a point per play and nearly a first down per play. That is insane efficiency. I don't care what opponent it's against. And in this case, it happens to be against a higher level group of 5 team and a team that last year was one of the better Power 5 opponents that Oregon could have played. Rest in peace to the Pac-12. That's very impressive. That's objectively elite numbers and elite efficiency. And Gabriel, once again, had a very high completion percentage. He's completing 84% of his passes right now for the Ducks, but this time he had a QBR of 99.3, basically played a near perfect game per ESPN's QBR, unlike the previous games where his QBR was in the 50s because he fumbled, had some pretty, whether it's meh completions or bad incompletions, got sacked a few times, looked awkward in the system. Here he looked confident. And with the numbers he put up of over 300 total yards, 3 total touchdowns, and his completion percentage, if his numbers increase, if Oregon decides they want to pass the football more, and he bumps up those numbers, he could be in the Heisman conversation again. He can. No questions about it, because he has Trayshawn Holden, he has Tez Johnson, he has Evan Stewart, he has Terrence Ferguson, who's really emerged as a threat in the pass game. He has Jaden Lamar. He has Gary Bryant Jr., who I still believe is injured. Let me know if he is healthy, but he's good. Good player. Oregon just has several great to elite wide receivers in their room. And Jordan James, Noah Whittington, they got active on the ground game. They combined for 19 carries for 150 yards, and they had 3 rushing touchdowns. So Oregon was just efficient. They tore Oregon State down. They went into their rival stadium and beat them so badly. Same case with Notre Dame over Purdue, that they put in their backup quarterback. They made it an open practice late. Very impressed with the coaching from Dan Lanning, Will Stein, Tosh Lupoy, and that entire staff. It was a great game plan. Oregon State did control the clock a little bit, but they only had about a 5-6 minute possession advantage, and Oregon outgained them by almost 250 yards, and they had 7 more first downs. They didn't turn over the football whatsoever. Again, the O-line only allowed 2 TFLs, no sacks. Oregon was 4 of 6 on third down. That's how you know you're dominant, when you have that few third down attempts, because on first down and second down, whether you're passing or whether you're running, you're that efficient. You're just picking up chunk after chunk, converting, never getting off schedule. Oregon looked like one of the better teams in the country Saturday. The only reason I wouldn't put them in that, who's number one yet is I just need to see more consistency. But they've certainly showed that they have the ceiling to be an elite team. And even with some of the limited upside that they have at quarterback, and maybe I'm wrong there, because Gabriel played a very good game, super efficient, and he has the receivers to where you don't need someone who's an expert at throwing the 50-50 ball to outscore people. If Oregon plays like they did in Week 3, they can compete for a national title, even though I think they have a lot more serious questions than people expected in the preseason. This is a down year in college football, and that's not Oregon's fault. And I could be wrong on that. It could end up being a strong year of college football. You really don't know until the season is over whether you can say it's, a strong or weak year. And that, while can be objective in measurement, it can also be subjective too, because each year in college football is different. I thought last year, for a lot of last year, was a weak year in college football. You look back on it statistically, and I think it actually was a strong year. You had several teams at the top, like Oregon being one of them, and then Washington, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, and, maybe, like if Penn State had Andy Kotelnicki last year as their OC instead of Yurcich, you could have put Penn State up there, and maybe Florida State if Jordan Travis was healthy. You had several teams, if you really take out Penn State and Florida State, you had 7 teams that could have won it all last year. That is very rare to have. And some would say that was because it was a down year. And yeah, like Alabama was down compared to what they were, but at the end of the year, they were better. And Michigan last year, Georgia last year, Oregon last year, Ohio State for parts of the season, and Washington, just looking at the talent they had, those teams, and Texas also for parts of the season, really profiled as like teams that would be easily top 4, if not top 3, top 2, number 1 in almost any other college football year. Like, that's how good the teams were last year. I don't want to ramble too much, but I'm just praising Oregon because they looked really good in week 3 against Oregon State. Oregon State falls to 2-1. Oregon, as I said to begin the video, you woke up just in time. Oregon will play next week in... Do they play in the Big Ten next week? I'm pretty sure they do. No, it doesn't look like they do. Looks like they get a bye in week 4. So in week 5, Oregon will play at UCLA, then Michigan State in week 6. Week 7 is when they host the Ohio State Buckeyes, and if they keep playing like this, they can beat the Buckeyes. My MVP of this game is, I think, obviously quarterback Dillon Gabriel had nearly a perfect game according to QBR. 20 of 24, 291 pass yards, 4 attempts, 64 rush yards, and 3 total touchdowns. He keeps this up, he could be a Heisman winner, especially if Oregon beats Ohio State. Every other opponent on the schedule, I'd say outside of Ohio State's a game where Oregon should win based off of how they performed on Saturday. And consequentially, maybe they can win the Big Ten. If they beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten, Dillon Gabriel is going to have some impressive numbers, even if he's not constantly throwing the ball downfield. So keep an eye on him for the Heisman. Seriously. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488 and Brasco Rascal for being Heisman Patreon members and sponsoring this video and channel. Thanks to Chris Lane, Honolulu OH, Ismar, Tyler Nye, and Chilton Cush for being All-American members. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for being All-Conference members. If you want to support the channel, check out my merchandise store and my Patreon page via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Have a great day, go Beavers, and go Ducks.